The following uses clips from Titanic, and I make no ownership of the film whatsoever. If you want to see Titanic in its full entirety, please purchase it on Blu-ray and DVD or on digital. Spearman Studios did not make any claims that I own the film, other than the fact that I'm using the clips as a point of criticism or commentary under fair use. Please enjoy the show. There are many things in this life that have brought us up, whether it be films, television shows, cartoons, video games, books, you name it. Everyone has had a favorite childhood memory of pieces of media in and around Hollywood, television, etc. And in this multi-part series, I aim to talk about the films, television, and other forms of media that have shaped me up into positive ways, in an effort to create more of a positive outlook on my channel. So, come with me as I explore the very films and other media that shaped the way I am today. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the media that made me. Today is Valentine's Day, and I gotta be honest with you guys, I really don't like Valentine's Day. I mean, the holiday is already kind of over-capitalized anyway. I mean, you gotta buy a lot of stuff just to appease people. Why not just have the sentimental value of being loved by someone? I don't know, it's just something different. But anyways, today we're going to be talking about a subject or a movie that made me love a disaster. And that is, of course, Titanic. One of my favorite genres of filmmaking is the disaster film. It's not the most well-known, it's not really a genre that anyone really likes, considering the whole notion of a disaster film is pretty much predicated on the fact that we can emotionally attach to characters that are going through very traumatic things, such as hurricanes or global events or even disasters like we're going to be talking about today, which is, of course, Titanic. I know this film has been talked about to death, but I would like to say that it really can't really add much to the discussion. Everyone's actually talked about this to death, so what can I really say about it? Well, I actually hold the film as more of a potential for what blockbusters can do, as sort of juggling hands, if you will, between the commercialism of blockbuster films and the artistic liberties that directors can have as auteurs. And that's what Titanic is to me. It's a hybrid of things that both sides can love. It's a universally beloved film that, no matter what your opinion of, it can still appeal to pretty much anyone. On the testimony of my own mother, I was 2 years old when I first watched the VHS tapes, and yes, this was back in the 90s when you had to watch it on two separate tapes because the film was over 3 hours long. And yes, these are still the original tapes that I have. Somewhere I have the Academy screener for Titanic as well, but I think it's in storage. But the question then becomes, how does a 2-year-old manage to sit through a 3.5-hour film and not be the slightly bit bored? Well, I think per se, it's the spectacle that really drove me to really appreciating this film in the first place. Now, I have to also bring up another factor that I think kind of adds into why people love this film a little bit more than some others. Back in the 90s, there was a film, a little-known film, you may recall, being Jurassic Park. Now, Jurassic Park was a film that, when it was released, it actually drove up the attendance rates of paleontology majors by, well, 25%, I think. At least I remember that's the number. But regardless, it's a film that was a blockbuster, but also kind of did something for a specific field of study. And with that correlation, I feel that because of James Cameron's attention to detail when it came to the production of Titanic, I felt that historically, it made me very interested in learning about history. I can only surmise that my current fascination with time, per now my now canceled show called Flashbacks, came from this film. More specifically, how the film handles historical accuracy. One of the things that made the film so successful to me was Cameron's attention to detail, and how he directed people in the production design and the costume department, even in the character dynamics and writing. It feels very natural, very flowing with the actual context of the film. It is talked about in various behind-the-scenes interviews that one of the things that James Cameron did prior to the making of this film was actually fund a couple expeditions to the site to actually research a bit more of what made the crash site so special. And in fact, the opening sequence of the film itself is actually a mixture of miniatures with fog to simulate the whole, abyss of being down in the water. But it's also but they also mixed in footage of them actually exploring the real Titanic. And you can actually tell this in the director's commentary for the Blu-ray. There was you can tell which is which by noticing how many of these submersibles there are. If there is one submersible, then they're actually at the real site. If there's two submersibles that you see in the shot, that is actually a miniature. A lot of the interior shots of the film, when it came to the opening sequence in the abyss, was actually done with models. A lot of it was pretty much there in terms of historical accuracy. It wasn't until after they went down that they actually, figured it out. And it's with that attention to detail that helps a little bit of the historical authenticity to the film. Even down to how the ship is depicted with its establishing shots add a sense of a former glory to the disaster. Look in these scenes how majestic and elegant the ship moves and glides through the ocean like an angel. Most of the presentation of the ship is presented at a leveled view, almost as if Cameron is presenting a titan on the level of humanity. But it's also pretty much inspired by a certain artist's work. I can't really remember the name of it. But he did a lot of really beautiful pastel water type, paintings of the ship. However, this is contrasted with the grandeur of the low-angle shots of the ship rising out of the sea during the sinking. Coupled with the score by James Horner with its synth choir, it's like the spirit of Titanic rose from the watery grave to tell us a story just the same way as Old Rose is telling the crew in the future tense. This framing of the ship shows that James Cameron understood how the ship was viewed as this magnificent, larger-than-life ship, a ship that could be thought of being immortal, only to be later juxtaposed by a skeleton of its former glory. James took the time not only to understand the detail to be put into the film to be properly represented, but how magnificent she really was to the world. The amount of detail that went into the scale models and eventually the sets is staggering. A film being made by a different studio would have lowered the film's budget to cut costs, made sure all the sets really wasn't there. Keep this in mind as we'll come back to this later. Everything from the grand staircase to the details and the china dishes is great. There's just so much commitment to detail here that it makes me sad that the production nearly ended in a disaster. In researching more about the making of the film, I found that there were many setbacks in this film. The crew got food poisoning from a bad serving of chowder. Cameron constantly argued with Fox and Paramount about their wanting to promote the film as an action movie, aside from a bunch of other different cultural setbacks, considering, for example, Leonardo DiCaprio smoking was not a very good thing to see in the eyes of the producers because they didn't want the main leads to be smoking. And culturally, at the time, that was very acceptable to have pretty much anyone smoke in a bar, even if it was a protagonist. And even gestures like this was actually, almost censored by Fox and Paramount because they didn't want to have a main protagonist go like this to anyone. And they also thought that that gesture was more of a modern thing. When in fact, James Cameron, if you were to look up the commentary for the film, actually explains that that gesture has been around for thousands of years. And even back then, it was much more common for women to do that than men, which is also something that we'll come back to in terms of gender representation. The film was even edited by Cameron himself, which caused a delay in its initial release of July 2nd to December 19th of the same year, which is, also why, it went for Oscars. A studio pushing a film's release date can mean one of two things for many people. Either A, the film itself could be, great and they wanted to push for an Oscar run, or you'll be like the people at the Washington Post who said this: with a production budget estimated at $180 million to $200 million, Titanic will easily surpass another ocean-borne epic, Waterworld, for the title of the costliest movie ever produced. Now, if you were on the outside of the film industry and had seen Waterworld, this comparison would actually scare you. Being compared to that train wreck of a film could have spelled disastrous doom. But the article actually continues on. Increasingly, Hollywood seems caught in a bigger is better mentality, and as the studios come to rely on these great, giant event pictures to bring in profits, Titanic is emerging as the prime example of that risk. Now, this common sentiment of big blockbuster filmmaking being a detriment to filmmaking has been around for, forever. And it's not hard to see where it actually comes from. I mean, big blockbuster filmmaking is very risky, considering that you're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on special effects, on actors, on spectacle, on these huge hours-long movies, for something that could eventually probably bomb if it's in the wrong hands. But on the day of the premiere, the film had a huge upset for those detractors. Having become the best film of the year, the film netted over $1 billion, which was doubled upon its 3D release in 2012, by the way. Its theme song became iconic, both within the film and as a standalone record, and the film set a record with 11 Oscar wins, including Best Picture. To me, this film is a great example that while the pressure from your peers can be heavy, as long as you have the drive and know how the story is supposed to be shown, sometimes your film can shatter expectations. When one gives enough of a shit about what they're making, it can become a solid film. Now, while the film's story is fictitious in its entirety, as Rose and Jack were not real in the first place, that wasn't the sole focus of the film. Yes, Romeo and Juliet on the Titanic was the exact pitch James made to Paramount. However, it's the subtext that turns this blockbuster into something more than what an average film snob would have you believe. At its core, the film is about four different things. Mankind's over-reliance on technology is humanity's ultimate demise, much like Terminator. Humanity is blind to the disasters that are right in front of us. The cultural cross-examination of the issues of class struggles and of class and gender. Let's dissect this first. It is clear from the get-go that both historically and narratively, the whole disaster is the embodiment of mankind's over-reliance on technology. Even in the panic of the sinking, they failed to save everyone due to the captain's insistence to follow the orders of Mr. Ismay. The ship itself was structured with a separation of class, with most of the immigrant families in third-class quarters and the industry moguls and wealthy families in the staterooms, even down to how Rose's own group of people viewed Jack as both an oddity at the dinner sequence and someone to be disgusted by as Rose continues to see him on the ship. Rose must deal with twice the hardships in her position as she faces expectations about her class as well as her gender. This can also be applied to Jack as well. In that same scene, we get a sense of how Cal views Jack. He views Jack as inferior to him. After Jack saves Rose from jumping, Cal's response to Rose's demands for Jack to come to dinner shakes him a bit. Cal reluctantly accepts her demand. Jack's economic status is further weaponized when Cal drops the Heart of the Ocean necklace in Jack's jacket pocket to frame him for the theft. Having to deal with her part of society's views on relationships, how a woman must be proper, and how women of her class are frowned upon if they date a lowly member of society. Now, a lot of this can be read in Jane Eyre, but given the story he is adapting, the baggage of societal problems at the time are translated into the narrative with near perfection. The film goes about not exactly critiquing the time, but actually showing that a lot of the problems that they had back then are still problems now. Still, we're all the same. We have characters that have emotions. Everyone has emotions, and everyone can feel very human. And my light is going out. That's fun, but we're going to continue anyway. There is a great scene where Rose is sitting at the dinner table the day after Jack's dinner scene. Old Rose is monologuing about how trapped she really felt being with her own family. She looks over to her mother and daughter at a table, and the mother teaching the daughter the proper way of being a lady. This kind of introspection allows us to get a sense of who Rose was and who she will become at the end of the film from her older self's narration. Also, a little side note, there's a little, you remember that butterfly, hair piece? That actually, in terms of James Cameron's own commentary, actually says that that's a symbol for, well, metamorphosis, to sort of change over time that she became from the start of Titanic to the end of the film. Now, we also have to discuss the film's ending. One of the things that is still obsessed over at the end of the day is why Rose throws the jewel in the sea. It has been parodied to death. Even back in the 90s, SNL made fun of it in this clip. What I think some people are missing here is that the true treasure that is gained from learning history isn't necessarily the jewels, the money, the fame of finding these discoveries. It is that the stories that they tell mean much more than just a jewel. You gotta understand, Titanic really didn't have any treasure on board the ship in the first place other than a few costly paintings. The jewel wasn't real, but was a thematic device for Rose and Cal's relationship and how she was emotionally anchored at first to Cal, but through the switcheroo that got Jack in custody, the jewel was the memory that, well, Rose took with her until she was ready to let go of it. The finale of her falling asleep has been interpreted in two different ways. Or at least I know of two different ways. Either she's falling asleep to the memory of her time with Jack, or she died and ended up in Titanic heaven. I feel with the thematic weight of the jewel being discarded, I feel like her being sent to heaven to a chorus of accepting applause is the perfect ending to her story. A life after Jack led her to gain more experience and memories. By Old Rose telling this long story to the treasure hunting crew, it allowed them to learn a story that was once thought of as lost. And to that end, I really love this aspect. This also solidifies why I love the storytelling of the film, because at the end of the day, what you gain from the sharing of memories, whether your own or another's, isn't necessarily the monetary gain, but the moral lessons we can learn from history. That's why stories of 9/11, Holocaust, or any other tragedy, or any other event in history are so important, because without the context for the wreckage or the artifacts, anyone can just simply sell history without any care of what it stands. Titanic is one of the best films of all time. When you aren't singing the theme song, the film works as a basic love story, and on further dissection, it is a deeper film about humanity's underpinnings in society and stance on technology. Since watching this film, I have held this film in a high regard as a blockbuster with brains. I became a fanatic to the subject. This picture right here, I don't know if you can actually see it, but this picture is of me back in 2003 when I went to OMSI for a special Titanic themed exhibit. It was one of my rare few fun memories that I had when I was a kid. And then, I got a couple documentaries. I got a collection of documentaries here. Got a whole box set of A&E documentaries. I don't know if anyone remembers what A&E is, but A&E was great. Of course, I got the VHSs, National Geographic, you got the Titanic, Secrets of the Titanic, and of course,
Spaceballs the dog, me.
Titanic is a brand.
So, this book right here. This book actually got me more into learning about Titanic, both the movie and the historical event, because so much detail is put into the pages of this book in terms of behind the scenes. And what this all shows at the end is that a lot of people are quick to assume that big blockbusters don't have anything new to offer, but Titanic is the best case against that mentality to me. As you can see, I was obsessed with this movie, as well as the subsequent historical facts. Maybe from your point of view, this seems creepy as hell to be obsessed with a maritime disaster, but rest assured that I don't actually mean to be creepy with that. Does the film have fallbacks? Yeah, if you aren't a fan of the film, many have pointed out that the film is melodramatic, which I don't have a fault with. And of course, the stupid plot hole that everyone has made a meme about, the Rose Jack floating on a board conundrum. I personally don't hold that view, as I've always thought that that Jack became weak from having to swim up after being pulled under from the current of the ship. I don't know, maybe that was it. Some of the CG doesn't quite hold up today, especially since the technology has advanced a lot since then. But this was one of the first instances of using a combination of CG, models, motion capture extras, and even one shot of a digital face transplant. This part was highlighted in the director's commentary, by the way. In the end, Titanic affected me very much. It's one of my favorite films of all time. And as the light turns out on this video, because my light is dying, I want to say this. I was fascinated with history all because of this film. And I still have fond memories of watching it. I still watch it to this day on Blu-ray and on digital. It's one of my favorite films to watch. And when I'm not thinking of the whole cultural context and whatnot of the film, I enjoy it as a basically entertaining film. And a lot of people ask me what my favorite film of all time is, and I believe this is one of them. This is Nicholas Jennings, and this is how Titanic affected me. If you would like to hear more from the media that shaped me, please consider subscribing and following, because I'm going to be planning on doing these every couple weeks or so. This is a series that's just going to be me talking about the things that I love for some time, and I can't wait to discuss it all with you guys. So, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.